Join me today for another campaign inspiration video. This time we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is the Geek Cabal channel. My name is Bobby, and today we're going to be talking about a movie that can serve as inspiration for your D&D or other RPG style campaign. And today's movie will be The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. A little background on the movie and a little bit of info about it before we continue. It's a Western, in case you didn't know. If you have not seen it, the main star is Clint Eastwood, who plays a man primarily referred to as Blondie. We never actually get a name for him, and part of the reason for that is because this is a movie in what is known as either the Man with No Name trilogy or the Dollars trilogy, alternatively. And in these movies, the man has no name, and it is believed that Clint Eastwood was playing the same character throughout all three, by some people. Sergio Leone, the director of all three, or Clint Eastwood might have actually specified that at some point. I couldn't say. But he seems to be playing the same character. And even though this was the third one made in the series, I believe it's actually meant to be the first one in the chain. And all that comes down to a single scene, I'm given to understand. Towards the end of the movie, he comes across a wounded soldier and gives him his overcoat. The soldier dies, and he goes to pick up his coat, pauses, and instead gets the kind of poncho duster kind of thing that he's wearing in the other two movies from beside the soldier, and puts that on. So I believe most of it's based on that scene. But I'm not as knowledgeable on the other two movies in the series, so I couldn't say, mainly because I haven't watched them all the way through, unfortunately. And I do intend to at some point, and they will probably wind up as more videos in this series. Because as I stated many, many videos ago, Westerns are great inspiration for these kinds of things. A lot of them have to do with revenge. So this one, like I said, Clint Eastwood's the main character. He is the good in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The bad is Lee Van Cleef as Angel Eyes. I don't think we ever get a real name for him either. No, I'm not sure we do. I think it is just Angel Eyes. Or if we do, it's one like throwaway line somewhere. He is the bad. He is a hired gun, but is also a Union soldier who works at a Union prison camp, and is clearly like exploiting the prisoners and stealing their valuables and beating them for information and stuff like that. But he also does the whole gun for hire thing on the side. And early on in the movie, as he is pursuing a man for another man, the man he's pursuing, gives him information about the whereabouts of a yet third gentleman and the new name he's going under, but also the fact that this guy has $200,000 in gold stashed somewhere, which obviously piques Angel Eyes' interest as a man who does things for money. And this being the Old West, that's a hell of a lot of money. So he kills that gentleman, although that guy gave him a bunch of money before he killed him. And as he tells that guy once he pays him that once he's paid for a job, he sees it through, then he shoots him. Then shoots his son and tries to shoot him, and then he rides off. And then he goes and gives the other guy the information. Then he's like, yeah, and he gave me a bunch of money. And he's like, why would he do that? Well, I think his intention was that I shoot you. And the guy kind of laughs. He's like, and as you know, once I get paid. And the guy's like, no, and he shoots him too. So now he's the only one with this information and is trying to find the guy under the new name. Then we have the third gentleman, Tuco, the Ugly, played by Eli. I don't know if his last name is pronounced Wallach or Wallach. Anyway, he is the Ugly, Tuco, And he's an outlaw. Some guys are trying to bring him in for money. Then Eastwood ends up capturing him. And Eastwood's plan is to turn him in for the reward. And then when they go to hang him, he's going to shoot the rope, snatch him up, and get out of there, and then go do that again someplace else. And they're going to split the money each time. Plus, once that happens a couple times, the reward's going to go up. So they have a working relationship. Then Tuco gets a little cocky, and Eastwood kind of gets a little cocky back, and Tuco's kind of like, well, since it's my neck on the line, I should be getting more of the money. And Eastwood's like, yeah, but as the guy doing the shooting, I should get money to make sure my aim stays steady. And then the next time, like, the rope doesn't split on the first shot. It's not because Eastwood intentionally missed, it just didn't happen. And so, like, the horse, I believe the horse that's underneath him takes off, and so he has to shoot the rope again. And so Tuco thinks he did it on purpose. And they get out in the middle of the desert, and Eastwood's like, yeah, I think it's the end of this partnership, and dumps him out in the desert and takes off. And then Tuco eventually catches back up and tries to get revenge. So the plot goes several other places that I'll get into here in a minute. I just want to note on a musical note, there's a couple songs in this movie that if you've seen some other things, you've probably heard before. I mean, there's the main song, which you've probably heard. But when Angel Eyes first arrives at the very beginning of the movie, his introduction music, Quentin Tarantino used again in Kill Bill Part 2, towards the very beginning of the movie, as they're getting ready for the dress rehearsal wedding, and the bride walks outside and Bill is out there waiting for her. So that's music's been used there. And then towards the end, when Tuco is searching the cemetery for the grave, the music there, an updated version of it, is used in Modelo commercials. So yeah, just a little trivia note there. So on to the plot and why it matters for what we're getting at here. The plot kind of meanders all over the place. It is essentially these three gentlemen weaving their way in and out of the Civil War, and the movie doesn't pull a whole lot of punches on the brutality of the Civil War, by the way. They are trying to find the gold and trying to outsmart and or double cross each other. So why is this a good idea for a D&D campaign? Well, I would look at it from the perspective of your group takes on the persona of Clint Eastwood's character, only now you're a group. Tuco is an acquaintance that you had an arrangement with that was probably illegal. You can adjust that to your liking, but Tuco being an outlaw is kind of important. And you being an outlaw is also kind of important, but like not an outlaw that's drawn attention, but you're definitely doing some illegal stuff. So then you have a falling out with Tuco. He tries to get revenge, but then in the movie what happens is as he is driving Eastwood through the desert, trying to drive him to his death, basically, they come across a stagecoach, and there's one guy left alive inside, and it's Bill Carson, which is the name of the guy, the new name of the guy that Angel Eyes is now looking for. And he tells Tuco that he's like, save me, and I'll lead you to a fortune in gold, $200,000 in gold. Because Tuco's initially just going to shoot him. So he's like, well, where is it? And he tells him it's buried in a cemetery, Sand Hill. But he won't tell him the name on the grave until Tuco gets him some water, and Tuco goes to get him some water, and in that time, Blondie crawls up, the guy tells him the name on the grave, and then he dies. So he threatens Blondie, and Blondie's like, nope, save me or you'll always be poor. So he tries to get him to someplace safe. The soldiers they came across were Confederate soldiers, so Tuco disguises himself as a Confederate soldier, claims to be Bill Carson, takes his papers. And before I continue, I guess I should have spelled out that there's going to be a lot of spoilers here. I'm going to spoil the entire movie. So, you had 40, 50 years to watch the movie. So, it's on you. And they arrive at a Confederate camp, and the Confederate tells them, hey, look, we're pulling out. Your guy won't be safe here. And then Tuco realizes where they are. he's like, hey, isn't this mission somewhere nearby? And like, yeah, it's like 15 miles over. And they go there. Well, his brother's a priest, and he's the one who runs the mission there. So, that's how he knows it's there. They take Blondie in, and they're like, he'll make it, but we got to let him rest and rejuvenate because Tuco had him out there in the blazing sun, blistered all over his face and everything, and dried out. So Tuco tries to give him the whole like, look, Blondie, you might not make it. Like, it'd be a shame for all that money to go to waste. Just tell me where it is, and he refuses to tell him. So they eventually leave. Oh, well, Tuco has a run-in with his brother, who is, our dad just died. That's where I was, and at the funeral, and he wished you were there. And he's like, Tuco, you're a scumbag for being an outlaw. And Tuco's like, look, where we came from, we had two choices: be an outlaw or be a priest. He's like, you chose the easy path. Like, I chose the hard path. People want to kill me. And his brother kind of sassed at him, and Tuco punches him in the face, and he leaves. And his brother looked at him like he kind of wanted to reconcile. And Tuco leaves. And Eastwood's character saw most of this, and as they're riding off, Tuco's like, "Oh, my brother's a good man. He took care of us." And he's like, I know that no matter what happens in my life, I've always got a brother out there that loves me." And Eastwood, like, he knows the score, but he's like, "No, I'm not going to ruin this guy's day. Like, he just had a really shitty encounter with his brother. Like, no, no, I'm not going to do it." So they're riding off dressed as Confederates, which their outfits are gray, for those of you that don't know. And a troop of soldiers comes up on horseback that appear to be in gray uniforms, but it's the dust on their uniforms. And the guy, as they're rolling up, Tuco's like, "Oh, hell, General Lee," and all this. And the guy comes up and like brushes dust off, and you see that it's blue. And so they get taken prisoner, get taken to the prisoner of war camp, where Angel Eyes is overseeing the camp. He's not the commandant of the base, but he's like the second in command. The commandant is dying from gangrene and is hoping to bust Angel Eyes, but he has no proof, so he can't really do much about it. Yeah. So he recognizes Tuco. Then Tuco claims to be Bill Carson. And Angel Eyes recognizes the name, but he recognizes Tuco. He knows him. So he gets him in there and forces the prisoners to start singing a song outside and playing some music, while his big enforcer type just beats the ever-living crap out of Tuco. And Tuco finally spills the beans on where the cemetery is and the gold and everything, but he doesn't know the name on the grave that the gold's buried in. And then they bring Blondie in, and he's like, Blondie's like, "Oh, no torture for me." And Angel Eye's like, "No." It's like, "I don't think that'd work on you anyway, would it?" And he goes, "No, not really." So instead, he gives him his clothes, and they're going to head out to the cemetery. And once they're out of the base, some guys that are in league with Angel Eyes show up and join him. Now, I'm not 100% certain of the reasoning as to why he did this, but Angel Eyes gives him a gun with bullets. And I guess it's like to earn his trust, to lure him into his confidence or something. But he obviously knows the downside, because Eastwood even remarks at one point, like, "Oh, 6 of you, 6 men, like 6 bullets in the chamber. What a perfect number." So, or something to that effect, anyway. So Tuco, however, is given to the big tough guy to be taken to another prisoner of war camp, presumably to be executed or something. But he's able to escape because they're on the train. He says he's got to pee. So once he's there, he's handcuffed to the guy. So he jumps and pulls the other guy with him, beats his head in with a rock. He can't break the chain, so then he puts that guy on the tracks and puts the chain there. And so the next train comes along, severs the chain. Then he goes, gets rearmed, and manages to catch up with the group. Eastwood hears him. There's a bounty hunter from the very beginning of the movie that catches up, gets to Tuco. He shoots him, and Eastwood recognizes, he's like, "Oh, every gun has its own sound," and he recognizes Tuco's. And there's a whole sequence where Tuco went to a gun store and like cobbles together a gun from parts from other guns to his liking as far as the speed and the trigger action and everything. So he goes to check that out, meets up with Tuco, shoots the guy that Angel Eyes sent to follow him. Then the two of them head back and start taking out all of Angel Eyes' characters. And this is set in a town that's being shelled by the Union at that point. Or at least I think the Union's the one shelling it. And then they get back there. Angel Eyes is gone, but they've taken out all his henchmen. Then they get to a bridge where the two sides are fighting over the bridge. There's a Union commander there who wants to blow up the bridge because he's like, we're just wasting men fighting on this thing, but neither side's ever going to be able to take it. And he's like, if only someone could do it. He's like, I can't. I'd be court-martialed, of course. He's like, but only if there was someone. And so, like, they kind of take the hint. They're like, we'll do it for you. So the commander gets wounded in the last skirmish, and they tell him, like, you just hang on for a few more minutes. Keep your ears open. So they go wire the bridge with dynamite, blow it up. The fighting continues for a little while. Then everyone kind of goes their own way because there's no bridge to fight over. They go across the river. That's when the scene I mentioned earlier with the wounded soldier takes place. Eastwood lies to Tuco about the name on the grave. He tells him it's Arch Stanton. Now, that is part of the clue, but that's not the whole clue. So Tuco runs off, gets to the cemetery before Eastwood does, and he finds the grave, and he's digging it up. Then Eastwood throws him a shovel, and he's like, here, you'll dig faster with this. He starts digging, but then another shovel gets thrown down, and it's Angel Eyes saying, yeah, and two can dig faster than one. And then he pulls his gun on Eastwood, and Eastwood just kind of stands there, and he's like, you're not digging. And then he cocks the hammer back, and he's like, well, there's no point. He's like, what do you mean? He kicks open the grave because Tuco's unearthed the coffin at that point, and you see there's nothing but a skeleton inside. Tuco's like, oh, you lied to me. And he's like, do you really think I'd trust you with that? And so then he's like, all right, I'm going to write the name on the grave on the bottom of this rock, and I'm going to put it in the middle of this like circular plaza that's here in the middle of the cemetery, and then we're going to have a shootout. Whoever's left standing, you'll know where the gold is. So they have their big shootout, and he had previously removed the bullets from Tuco's gun without Tuco noticing. So he knows Tuco's not a threat, Eastwood. So he focuses entirely on Angel Eyes, shoots him, kills him, and then he goes over and Tuco sees there's no name on the bottom of the rock, and they go back to the grave. He's like, it's the grave with no name next to Arch Stanton. So he forces Tuco to dig it up. There's the gold. Then he splits the gold, but he also makes a noose for Tuco and has him stand on top of a cross there marking one of the graves and puts him in the noose and rides off with Tuco screaming. And then he turns back around and shoots the noose, so Tuco's free, but he's still tied up. And that's basically where the movie ends. So now here we are 18 minutes into the video. As you see, there's lots of twists and turns, betrayals, some side missions, all kinds of things you can go through in this with your whole, hey, there's a huge treasure at the end. So you have the betrayal of Tuco, and then you have Tuco coming back for revenge, and he brought some henchmen with him in the movie, so you'd have an excuse for him to have a henchman to come at you at the party. But then all of you meeting this point where you have half the information, he has half the information, so you're forced to work together. Then you have the outside party enter into the equation when everyone gets captured. Then you have to get your way out of the prison camp. You have to get your way away from his men. And then ultimately you have to work your way through the situation with the bridge. Now, obviously, you're going to adapt these concepts to whatever world you're working in, because you're probably not going to have a convenient civil war happening, although you could. So, yeah, there's just several twists and turns. There's several interactions, interesting potential NPCs you could just port over into different roles. And, yeah, I mean, it's a Western, so they've got guns, but assuming you don't have guns, just everyone has, swords and crossbows and magic and whatnot. And it'll take a little working because, there are certain parts of the movie, like I said, it doesn't make any sense at all for Angel Eyes to give Eastwood back his gun. So, you would need to have something more to it. It would be, okay, we're going out into the wilderness. I don't trust you, but I trust in your sense of self-preservation to not die. So if we get attacked, you'll at least put up a good effort. Things like that. But other than that, other than the minor tweaks you'd have to make it fit the setting, I think it's a pretty good example of a story with some twists and turns, little side quests. Maybe it itself could be a side quest and another thing. But yeah, so that's how I would adapt it. And yeah, definitely a source for inspiration. Maybe just little bits and pieces of it. Maybe just the whole bit with the bridge. Maybe the how do we get out of the prison. Maybe the how do we resolve the hey, I've got half the information, you've got half the information, and we obviously can't just threaten to kill each other to get it. So there's ideas there, is what I'm trying to say. So hopefully you guys take some kind of inspiration from this, or just decide to watch a really good western. Uh, Probably one of the best westerns. I happen to like Pale Rider more as far as Eastwood's westerns, but that's just personal take. I'll have to think a while on how to adapt that one, though. That's a little bit different kind of story. But anyway, this has been another episode of Campaign Inspirations. So hopefully you guys liked it. If you want to see more stuff like this, let me know down in the comments. Is this at all helpful to your campaigns? What do you use for inspiration in campaigns? Is there anything you'd like me to look at to see if I can somehow figure out how to make it into a campaign? Because like I said, sci-fi is actually kind of hard sometimes. But always like a challenge. Anyway, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Comments and sharing are probably the best things you can do to help the channel grow if you're so inclined to do. But otherwise, that's about all I got. So, yeah, I will see you folks later.